Hey, it's been a bit. So I hope everyone's been having a wonderful time experimenting with Pariah Nexus lately, particularly if you're playing Firestorm or if you're just getting into the hobby and experimenting with Marines. I've had a lot of people finding my videos and commenting on them lately, which I'm super excited about. And as I posted previously, I haven't put up a full video in a while because of Pariah Nexus and its release and the timing it had with different videos I was scripting at the time. Now that some time has passed and Pariah has had full exposure to the community and we've all gotten several reps in it, I feel comfortable re-scripting those videos as well as making stuff like this and kind of continuing with where I left off. Today we are going to be talking about another Salamanders list of mine, but we're going to be talking about Firestorm in general. We're going to be talking about some of my thoughts on Pariah Nexus, and a little bit of a glimpse of my tournament adventure and how I am going to Nova for the very first time to compete in the Super Major there. I wanted to start though by kind of talking about some of my, I guess, credentials, if that makes sense. I put a lot of stuff out there list-wise, both on the internet or with friends, and it tends to differ quite widely from, I wouldn't necessarily say the competitive population so much as the general population, and rightfully so. When I post lists that say run Salamanders but don't have Vulcan in them, people have questions both on why as well as the actual performance of the lists I put out there. Now, some of you have tried them and you've told me how much you enjoy them, which is great, but going forward, since I'm not only talking about like sort of conceptual thoughts in Pariah, but also I want to be doing more and more list building videos around more expansive factions, I thought it would be best to go ahead and talk about where I'm coming from as a tournament player. As I've previously stated, I've been playing 40K for nearly 2 decades now. It'll be probably 20 years in October, but I never really did competitive tournaments until probably, I think it was July or August of 2023 was the first competitive tournament event I ever went to. From there though, I am lucky to live in an area that has an incredibly healthy competitive community in 3 different cities, and I've been very warmly adopted by all those groups. They're wonderful people that have allowed me to really not only compete at a very high level with them and learn with them, but has also made me genuinely excited to go to these tournaments because of the people I get to see there. So it's been a wonderful time. During that tenure, so it's a little over a year now, I have done rather well for myself. With my Salamanders in particular, I have won 3 RTTs, podiumed at another, although technically I wasn't running Firestorm at that one. Funny story we'll get into. And I came 4th in a grand tournament here, the first GT I've ever gone to, and won the Knight of the Blue Ridge Award for sort of the Renaissance Man Award of that tournament. Overall, the course of 10th, I have a 90% win rate with my Space Marines, a win rate that actually goes up if I go first, contrary to what the typical pattern is in 10th edition. It goes up to about 95% if I go first. Since Pariah came out, I've participated in 2 RTTs. The first one, where I basically learned Pariah, I came in 3rd, and the most recent one I actually ended up winning with my Salamanders. Technically, I was running Blood Angels. Essentially what I did was I just added a ball predator to my Salamanders lists because they're really funny. I recommend trying it one day, especially if you have like one of those Horus Heresy predator support tanks lying around. That's essentially what I used as a ball predator. And in Firestorm, they're a lot of fun. And paint them green, you know, you could use it in Heresy. That's what I ended up doing. Overall, I'm not saying this to brag. Again, I'm saying this to establish a sort of baseline credibility with you all of the track record I have, the amount of times I interact with the community at large in this area that I live and help and sort of see varying levels of competitive lists, and hope to just establish a sense of credibility with you all, especially if you're new to the channel. With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and talk about my upcoming list that I am bringing to Nova. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have the opportunity to play this at another tournament before Nova. I'm going to have maybe a couple days to do some games with friends to see how it performs. It's not terribly different from one that many of you may have seen in my previous lists. A lot of those lists were obviously before updates though, so the land raiders were 25 points cheaper and the captain had a different ability for his rights of battle, or rather it was the back when battle tactics were being zeroed out still, and that was it. I'm going to talk a lot about the transformation of Firestorm as a result of the Pariah Nexus update. It was something that if you were on the Salamanders Reddit or Discord or anyone was talking about Firestorm, it was brought up a lot, often with quite a bit of gloom. We're going to get into that. I figure what I'll do first is show you all the list, kind of talk through it, go through my thoughts on Firestorm and Pariah, and then as a result of that, talk about what a lot of you have been wanting to see, and that is kind of the way I play and my play style, which I'm going to have a more dedicated video, more visual video coming out, but I think this is a good opportunity to go over it in brief. The list starts out very familiarly. We can go ahead and describe the things that have been there for a few iterations of the list now, and that is the Land Raider Redeemer. Yes, we're keeping it. If 25 points is enough for you to get rid of your Redeemer, you didn't deserve the Redeemer in the first place. But we're keeping the Redeemer with the Captain and Gravis Armour and the 6 Flamestorm Aggressors. These guys constantly perform well for me. They are able to punch and flame and draw firepower, and if you have enough points in a list you make to have that Captain have Forged in Battle to make one easier to save, you know, you can turn a save to a 6 once per turn. It makes them incredibly durable to an annoying degree. And I just love this unit so much, and I've put a lot of love as well into painting them. Here on screen is my most recent version of a Gravis Captain that I've made that has the Relic chainsword. He's gonna be my Warlord for Nova, and I'm just really happy with how he came out. Then we have the 2 Repulsor Executioners. A lot of you have seen in my list that are transporting 3 Eradicators each. This is a very versatile unit in Firestorm. The ability to give these a potential 16-inch move to get around corners, especially with all the terrain and the layouts we're seeing for Pariah, is very useful. And the Eradicators are really great, even if they don't have a target, even if you are one of the persons that sees this list and thinks it's too much anti-tank. Hey, you have T6 3-wound action monkeys now that are riding around fairly free, so have fun with it. From there, if you've been following the channel, you know that I've kind of flip-flopped on jump infantry, not taking them out of the list, but which jump infantry I've been including. At first I was running Vanguard vets with hand flamers and a captain with a hand flamer, which was a really fun combo, and then I said I'm taking them out and I'm putting in jump marines with the chaplain for the more reliable mortal wound bombing. In my most recent events, the pressure the list is able to exert has been instrumental to my wins. Being able to corner enemies and rush them and make them feel uncomfortable with aggressive marines. And as a result, the list is actually now not just including 10 jump marines, it is including 30. Yes, I know jump marines are really good in Pariah Nexus, yada, 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 bandwagon. Look, I'm not bandwagoning. This was a conscious decision of mine after several games, realizing what my list was doing. And yes, there are 2 5-man jump marine squads because they are good for secondaries, and I was running them at these RTTs and they were doing really well. In addition to that though, we're gonna bring back the 10 Vanguard vets with hand flamers and the captain, and we're gonna put in the 10-man brick of jump intercessors with the chaplain. This is so much fun, and it really leans well into a sort of tactical idea that I've been learning and teaching myself as I've been playing the game, and one we're going to go over in a moment. And it just is so exhilarating being able to be that quick with Marines and that deadly, and seeing people just not really know what to do. I've had times where opponents literally just kind of freeze in their movement phase because of the mobility that allows. And the fact that these are very well force multiplied units in Firestorm means that the enemy knows their threats and really doesn't have great answers for them because they're infantry that can be hidden. So we've got the 2 jump characters, we've got the Gravis character, we've got the 30 jump marines split into 4 different squads. How do we round the list out? We only have 75 points, so we put Assault Intercessors as our battle line. If I had 5 more points, these would be normal Intercessors. The value of Sticky in Pariah, I think, is way higher, given that capturing the outpost is no longer in the game, and given that deployment zones are harder to screen now. So Infiltrators are out of my list because their value is significantly diminished in Pariah Nexus. From there, I think we can go ahead and talk about my thoughts on Firestorm in Pariah Nexus. As I said, a lot of people that play Firestorm or Salamanders, let's just say, were really upset about the changes to Pariah Nexus. What were they upset about? They were upset about the rights of battle change, so no longer being able to 0 CP a battle tactic, because a lot of our stuff is battle tactics, namely immolation protocols. Now, instead of 0 CP, it's going to cost 1, and you can't duplicate strats. They were also upset about, being able to assault and do action, or advance and do actions, because of our ability being taken away, and advance and do grenades, which that one did hurt me. That I took that personally because I love the grenade stratagem so much and abused it endlessly. I'm here to tell you all it's okay. Firstly, the ability to advance and do actions was kind of busted. Yes, it does mean that Jump Marine stocks are incredibly up right now. It also means it affected a lot of other factions as well. Eldar are kind of in a weird spot right now because they can't advance and do actions. They're still Eldar, but it's weird. Advancing and shooting is still great. If you're running transports and you have mobile units, you can still do the actions. And frankly, there's plenty of secondaries in Pariah, I'll talk about in a moment, that I'm kind of okay just not doing. Second, the rights of battle change. So I'm going to say something a lot of people are going to disagree with. If you were using immolation protocols more than once a game, there's a good chance you were using it too much. Immolation protocols is fine. It's fine. Like, it's good. I've done 11 dev wounds to Magnus with aggressors, only 5 aggressors once, and it was amazing. It is not something to build your entire list around. It is not something with the tools that you have that once it gets crippled and you have to suddenly pay for it, your list is dead. And it's not something you should complain about spending a CP for, quite frankly. It's still good, it's still fun, and it still has a wide swing to do quite a lot of damage. If you roll hot with some aggressors, you will melt whatever you shoot at. The Vanguard vets with hand flamers, most recent game I used it on them because there's a captain in that squad. They did 7 to a ghost keel, then charged it and killed it. The ability to be very versatile with it is very nice. But again, you're doing on average between like 6 and 8 dev wounds, which a lot of people are bad at picking the ideal target for those dev wounds. Again, if you're using it more than once, there is a good chance you're using it too often, because ideally you've eliminated or have a plan to eliminate the targets of it with very careful application of everything else. And then because it's 40k, there's a good chance that your units that are using it are getting bombed very quickly. Aggressors, for instance. Aggressors, again, I love them, and you can make them more durable. The minute they're out in the open, they will get torn up if the opponent is left with resources to do so. A single Forge Fiend can wipe that squad very easily. A Predator can make you sweat when it's shooting at you, particularly if it's one of the new Chaos factions where they can have a Predator with an autocannon that can shoot at AP3 potentially. It is not so critical that you need to be concerned. And the ability to zero out other items, other stratagems is really good. 1 CP Heroic Intervention is amazing, bringing it down to 0 right now. It's phenomenal, especially with these jump packs, because the Assault Jump Intercessors, when they heroically intervene, they still do their mortal wound bombs because it happens on a charge move. Yes, I know that the captain's not leading them, just bear with me, I'm giving broad examples. My point is that there is enough utility in Firestorm that to have to pay 1 CP for immolation protocols is not as big of a handicap as a lot of you are making it out to be. And I challenge you to play and build your lists with that in mind. With that mindset of you're probably only using that strat once. I have won several games where I just didn't use it at all because it just never really came up. Overall, the reason it is still so strong is this. The ability to advance and shoot is still incredible on your entire army. 18-inch moving threat range land raiders or redeemers and 16-inch repulsors, eradicators being able to advance and shoot, even the Vanguard vets having an 18-inch hand flamer sort of threat range, again, which is multiplied very well with immolation protocols, I do admit that. It's very threatening. And a lot of you are probably wondering, you're running 30 jump packs, you're running quite a lot of melee, why are you running Firestorm? Firestorm's applicability goes beyond the advance and shoot. So again, those hand flamers are going up to strength 4, which is quite nice for chipping away at stuff, especially if you're doing the Devlin strat. But you know, the jump packs don't really care. Their pistols become like strength 5, which is kind of nice. But the good thing about it is Crucible of Battle is still a thing in Firestorm. +1 to wound for 1 CP, which again can be made to 0. With the Chaplain, the jump pack intercessors are already getting +1 to wound, which means you're free to use this for free on your aggressors if you want to with their Twin Link Power Fists, or on your other jump packs that are running up and pressuring the field. You have 3 bricks of very efficient melee units, that 2 of which have a very decent range profile as well for dealing with chaff or punching up a little bit into elite infantry with a strat, that you can use a 0 CP ability on, or just spend 1 in general to give 2 of your units +1 to wound in melee. Hell, you can use it multiple phases. If you have enough CP, let's say you just have 1 CP and your aggressors get out and there's Chosen in front of you, right? You can spend a CP there and wound that entire brick on 2s because you have strength 5 flamers because of your range, AP -1 if they're the closest thing, ignoring cover, re-rolling your wounds. Then you charge with the jump intercessor somewhere, mortal wound bomb +1 to wound. You charge with the aggressors, Twin Link Power Fist, maybe into the oath target. You charge with the Vanguard vets, lance on the charge, +1 strength, +1 to wound with 0 CP because there's a captain leading them. You know, you have all these really good force multiplication abilities that you can synergize with in your list to give you a wide range of threat application on the battlefield. And it doesn't all have to be centered around advancing and shooting because of that stratagem and because of the ability to zero it out. Also, generically, just being able to hop back in your transports in Pariah Nexus and move around and disembark and do something else somewhere else very quickly is actually pretty great in Pariah. You know, not being able to advance and do actions, that hurts. It affects everyone, and we're one of the only detachments, not the only, that can get back in the transport, zoom out, get back out, and do an action over there. Particularly, you know, eradicators that just killed something, now don't really have much to do. Spend a CP, they pop back in, they zoom over, you drew sabotage or recover assets. They go where they need to go. Heck, if you recovered assets, you could drive right up to a border of a line for recover assets, because it's like, I think it's your deployment zone, no man's land, enemy deployment zone. Pull up, tank parks, does recover assets, eradicators get out, does recover assets, and you've got 2 right there. It's very applicable. So stop worrying so much and just go play Firestorm and have fun with it. And I mentioned in Pariah there may be some secondaries that I don't want to do. Something you guys need to know is that if you draw a secondary that completes at the end of your opponent's turn, such as sabotage, right, or recover assets, you cannot use new orders on those if you fail to do them. So if I draw sabotage and I say, okay, I'm going to keep it, I'm going to do it, and I set a unit to do sabotage, and my opponent kills it, I still have Sabotage at the start of my turn, and because I did not draw it this turn, I cannot use new orders on it, which means I have a dead secondary that I either need to decide to try and do again or discard at the end of my turn. And this is what I mean by, yeah, we can't advance and do actions. There are some instances where I would be okay just not doing the secondary, planning to pitch it, getting the CP, and just increasing the lethality of my army, particularly because you can kind of build in such a way with Marines right now to, or with a lot of different factions, to kind of cheese secret missions. And if you're just applying pressure like my list does, you will catch up on things and you will prevent secondaries. An example of a way you can do this is, let's say you're playing one of the missions that really just doesn't care about home objectives. You can just set those assault intercessors into strat reserve and then wait till turn 3. Okay, you wait till turn 3, suddenly they just deploy on a flank in your opponent's deployment zone because you're allowed to now, it's turn 3. And if you're not winning on primary, you just take the one where you have a battle line unit in your opponent's deployment zone, you focus on killing their battle line, you put the assault intercessors, you outflank them somewhere where they're going to be out of line of sight for basically the whole game, rapid ingress them and move them if you need to get them to that point, and you just score 20 points on primary. You know, you can, it's dumb, I don't really like secret missions, but it's something you can do and you don't have to worry a ton. I know that doesn't help you with secondary scoring, but my point is still valid because you could be playing in such a way to limit your opponent's secondary and primary scoring by leaning more aggressively into things. And that brings me to really the final main part of this video is my playstyle and a brief sort of way I go about that. A lot of you know that I play very aggressively, and one of the things I enjoy is that a lot of people see Marines and they expect the tactics. They expect, you know, Vanguard, the uppy-downy shenanigans, Inceptors. They also expect a bit of a gun line. They do not expect a Marine list that is trying to punch you in the mouth as hard as it can, and a lot of people don't know what to do about it. Chaos does, because they kind of have the ability to countercharge, and you kind of have to be a little careful when you're playing against Chaos. But a lot of ranged armies that kind of rely on outmaneuvering Marines aren't used to being very rapidly chased down and cornered by Marines. It is a super fun way to play, and I utilize a tactic that I like to call Trapdoor Spider. I was going to put an image here of a Trapdoor Spider, but I recently learned that one of my friends is arachnophobic and watches these. And also, Trapdoor Spiders are kind of gross, and that's coming from someone who likes spiders. Look them up. They're like weirdly fleshy looking. So imagine there's an image or a GIF here of one. Trapdoor Spider is not unique to Marines. It is a tactic that is viable and should be used with any army that has access to fast melee infantry. Essentially, the general idea with fast melee infantry, especially with newer players, is they are overly reckless with them. They see the speed, they see the capability, they want to get up the field as quick as possible and kill something. But the problem is this usually leads to this unit being killed, particularly if it's vanilla Marines, because vanilla Marines are not very durable. You know, plasma guns will kill you, there's plenty of damage to weapons in the game. And, you know, if you're too far up, someone's going to countercharge you. So you use a sort of trapdoor mechanic. Essentially, when you are deploying, you should find an area where you are safe to deploy. This is very easy in tournament play for any tournaments that use true line of sight or first floor is obscuring, stuff like that, because you can hide, but you're still infantry and you can go through walls. This makes the 30 jump packs very interesting because they have a lot of room that they can cover very freely in Pariah Nexus that vehicles really can't because of how choked it can be, and are able to stay safe while also maintaining that aggressive sort of step. When they move, you move them, ideally advancing them on the first turn if you can, up into a safe position or somewhere where they are doing a action that's relatively concealed. There are plenty of layouts where this is possible, and you basically need to identify one that is going to be most advantageous to you. And it's particularly good if it gets closer to the opponent's deployment zone, but in such a way that the opponent isn't then going to rush you with a unit of their own, such as like, a Genestealer block. What this ends up doing is exerting a very large zone of control on this area. And if you have enough units, or the objective is positioned in such a way that you can actually hide here and still be doing things like capturing that objective or doing cleanse and things like that, you find yourself in a very profitable position. If the enemy wants to try and root you out from here, they have to come closer to you, at which point you pounce and come out like a trapdoor spider. You come out of your hole and you get them. What this does is it means two things. One, your unit is relatively safe. It's going to be safe from shooting unless the enemy is incredibly quick or deep striking around the line of sight blocks that you've created. And it's pretty safe from melee, particularly if you're a fights first unit, unless somebody is coming through and charging you with a similarly very quick unit. It also then is exerting a very wide zone of control. Remember, fast infantry is typically anything that can move from 8 to 12, and all these jump marines move 12. Now again, we're only really focusing on 2 of those units, as 2 of them are for secondary usage, but these 2 units can actually defend the secondary usage units in a very interesting way. A lot of these actions with tournament terrain can be done in areas that are obscuring line of sight. Sabotage, for one, needs to be done on terrain, but you can get into cubbies where essentially your Marines, your 5-man Marines, are hard to see. Additionally, there are plenty of terrain layouts that somewhat overlap with the objectives, and while you don't want your big brick running all the way up there, you can have the small brick run up and do a cleanse or do an area denial, and very easily kind of have themselves out there ready to be killed, but in such an angle, in such a way that the enemy has to get a little too close to kill them, otherwise you score primary points on your next turn. The threat range of these 2 jump units, which again can hit very hard with +1 to wound capabilities, is around 24. We're talking a 12-inch move with a 12-inch potential charge range. And one of them has 12-inch flamethrowers, which solidifies it as a very sturdy 24-inch threat range, especially because they can advance and shoot them as well and do dev wounds, which nobody's going to like, especially if they only attacked you with a weak part of their force that you can very easily dispatch that way and lock down a flank. But that's essentially the main essence, is you put yourself into these hidden positions, and the minute anyone sort of creeps into these zone of controls to try and contest your ability to hold that flank, you pounce out and you attack them. And it works really well. Part of the reason it works so well is the speed of these units, because once they dispatch something, they are able to relocate incredibly quickly. Oftentimes, if I was doing this with just a normal melee unit, not only would I really have to worry about the distances and the speed, but once they held down a flank, they were kind of stuck there, and I would always be risking moving out of position to go aid somewhere, 2 turns later, maybe the opponent comes around. But with the jump marines, you can be wherever you need to be very quickly. While you're doing Trapdoor Spider, you're ideally moving around and being pretty aggressive with the Redeemer and the Repulsor Executioners, kind of laying down the law in certain areas while not overexposing yourself. A Redeemer alone can also Trapdoor Spider with the aggressors, moving up to some middle L formations, basically cutting off being shot by heavier weaponry from a whole half of the table, and then setting yourself up to dump off the aggressors into terrain that can then move up, flame, and charge, and then you advance around, which, remember, 2 very important things: pivot rule, and the fact that the Redeemer can go over any terrain that is 2 inches or less. And a lot of the GW terrain layouts, the official ones, have terrain that is designated that way, meaning the Redeemer can just move 18 inches through some ruins, be on the other side, and just obliterate something. Be very aggressive with its positioning, but make sure you're not overexposing it to too much anti-tank, and establish your line of fire with your repulsors early. You obviously want to give them some cover. They're very hefty, they only have a 3-up save, but the absolutely blistering amount of firepower on these things is enough for anyone to kind of be wary of them. And 16 wounds is a lot to chew through. The only things that I really get scared of are like Tau and Tyrannofexes. And even on the Tyrannofexes, you know, you get a save, you might make one, and he might fail to hit. The Repulsors themselves need to be hanging out on flanks where they're needed, either together or separated, depending on how your opponent is moving. If they're together, you can very firmly lock down a single area of the board, but your opponent can also dodge quite a bit of your anti-tank. And you kind of have to dictate whether or not that's worth it scoring-wise. Separated, you might have a bit more of a risky position, but if you've set up your flanks well, your Redeemer is drawing a lot of the attention of the enemy and is being aggressive towards one of the two flanks, you're going to be in a good position. And that's something to note. You're going to have a strong and a weak flank, and the center is just kind of typically going to be yours. Because of the speed of your army and because of the profile of a lot of your tanks, your opponent is really not going to want to set foot in the center of the battlefield. And you have the speed on both flanks that if they do, you've got them. So essentially what you're going to be doing is having a strong and a weak flank, and you need to be kind of understanding the capabilities of the units you put on both flanks to deal with those threats. The Repulsors are incredible anti-infantry, but all of their guns can even go into larger stuff, and it's worth noting that a +1 to wound stratagem on this tank is also really good with the amount of firepower it has, particularly if it's going into something that just has a 3-up save. You know, you get up in someone's face with a heavy bolter that is suddenly strength 6 and is suddenly wounding on 4s and is twin linked, and maybe you're shooting an oath target, you're probably going to kill whatever you shot at with all of the guns doing stuff like that. In fact, the biggest sort of blocker for Repulsors in competitive play is you need to be quick rolling it because of how much time it is going to take. With that, I think I've talked enough. It's getting hot in here and my throat is starting to hurt. I'm going to close out by sending a shout out and a list to a fan who found me on Reddit and has been messaging me by the name of Camping Carl. Carl is thinking of buying 2 Repulsor Executioners because they've been running 2 Land Raider Redeemers, but they don't think they're getting enough for their investment points-wise that way, and they like the way my lists run. So I made this list for you, Carl, called Twin Comet. It's very simple. Captain and Gravis Armour, a single unit of Intercessors, 2 6-man unit of Flamestorm Aggressors, 2 5-man unit of Jump Marines, 2 Repulsor Executioners, 2 Land Raider Redeemers, 2 units of 3 Eradicators. It's silly, and you may lose a friend if you play it, but you know, if you've got the right opponent and they're willing to see that kind of goofiness on the table, I hope you have fun with it if you've bought the Repulsors and get an opportunity to run it soon. More videos coming soon, more expansive list building videos, as well as my report from Nova that I'm gonna do my best to take a few videos and photos. I'm not great at it, but I'm gonna try. And I hope you all have a good one. Let me know if you have any questions.